Did you have Colin Quinn? Did you work for Colin Quinn?
Yeah, on remote
So wait
control.
a minute. Wait, you pressed something the shape of a penis into the icing?
Yeah, and said that Colin had pressed his penis into the cake.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, you worked for remote control?
That was my first TV show. Yeah,
Oh, wow, I liked that show. I used to watch that all the time. That's
yeah,
funny. We should
yeah.
talk about that.
Okay.
You want to open with talk? I don't know if anyone remembers that show, but
Well, I just got interviewed by a, 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 they're doing an oral history of remote control, the Onion AV Club. So people remember it, people of a certain age.
well, I mean, I think we should start, and I'm I'm going to share a Colin Quinn joke. So,
Okay, all right. And then I want to talk about tonight was the Emmys, and I want to talk about them anyway. Okay. All right. So one episode 175. I guess we're already going. Um, and we were talking about how my first TV job was remote control, and then Lance has a Colin Quinn joke.
oh,
Go ahead.
Colin Quinn was this comedian on remote control, and he wasn't even really a comedian. He was just sort of a guy that was very kind of blue collar. He played a very working man kind of guy. His jokes were very dry, and they asked him what was the most important thing about a woman, and he said the butt. And I remember thinking that was really funny. I'm sorry, but that was before our nation became far more uh, chocolate. And now it's everyone assumes that the butt is vitally important. But back then, we were a much more vanilla country,
Right. And nobody had
and for a
asses
guy
because
to say,
white people during the remote control era, the 80s, late 80s, I mean, up until, especially in the 70s, it was, the media was very blonde, very skinny, and it was all braless tits because everybody was skinny and people's tits were small enough to point outward instead of sagging downward without support. And everybody had a flat ass in those satin jogging shorts.
I missed what you just said, but because
The
of poor
70s
internet.
and then into the 80s, yeah, everybody, it was media was very white, and everybody was very skinny, and there were no asses to speak of. And then
Yeah.
if you look at like the WAP video, and any other fucking, though that's the only one. I don't watch videos anymore, but I saw that one. I mean, it's ass intensive,
Yeah.
which we've discussed
Yeah.
before.
I actually, I'm sorry, but I'm going to repeat a joke from 3 or 4 shows ago where I was watching this video with Cardi B and her dancers in it, and I said to the person I was with, "Where are all the thin dancers?" And I went, "Oh, Cardi B ate them." So anyway, now what is your? So you actually did write for Remote Control, which was a great show.
I started off as a fact checking as an intern, fact checking the questions, and then uh, when you work as a fact checker, you end up writing questions because you run into facts that would make interesting questions in the course of your work. And so eventually I became a writer, and then a bunch of lucky shit happened to me.
So what was the? I remember talking with you about it 25 years ago and telling you that while watching it, I began to feel icky, sort of like, why am I sitting here? Like, I felt like one of those kids that stays home from school because he says that he's sick, but isn't really that sick. And after a while, gets tired of staying in bed and just is kind of embarrassed about the whole thing.
That was my
And that's
entire
how you feel.
that was my
Yeah,
entire childhood because
well, maybe it came out in the show when you were
no,
writing
I
it
mean
because it
no,
had an
well yeah,
icky
because
feeling.
it's based on the shit TV that we grew up with. For people who don't know, Remote Control was MTV's first game show, and it was consisted mostly of questions about the shitty TV that we all grew up with. Like Gilligan's Island. I mean, the repeats that you watched all day, because there are only three channels. And during the day, they were fucking. If you were a kid, you didn't watch soap operas. You just watched the repeats. And I remember days of misery with that icky feeling you're talking about, where I'd watch Gilligan's Island and hate it because I knew it wasn't good TV and I wasn't entertained by it, or I was minimally entertained. I was entertained enough that I wasn't driven to turn off the TV and go do something productive. And since I was like 8 years old, I didn't know what being productive was. You'd have to be more of a fucking prodigy than I was to figure out that the TV is telling you to turn it off and for you to start like reading fucking books or learning something. So Gilligan's Island, and then three flavors of Lucy. I Love Lucy, then Life with Lucy, and the Lucille Ball Show. There were three different fucking series. And they were all the same fucking show, except minus Ricky after the first. But it's still like Lucy gets in comedic trouble and then has to get out of it. And they were all. I mean, I Love Lucy is a classic, great show, but you'd already seen all the episodes, and also it didn't have any insight to tell you. It was just a well done exercise in hitting that one note that Lucy wants to be in showbiz, and she gets in trouble, and then she tries to cut. It fucking just there wasn't.
Yeah.
But I would
And the
believe.
thing, go ahead.
Carol and I watched the Emmys tonight,
All right.
and the COVID Emmys, and
Ooh.
I thought they were the best award show I've ever seen, because the limitations created by COVID forced them to do all sorts of, I thought, really clever and entertaining stuff. I don't think the ratings will be any good because I think people are pretty much over award shows, especially in our time of trouble right now. But it was really good. Um,
Well, what one that seemed notable to you?
Schitt's Creek won the first 7 awards or so. It won, best director, best comedy writer, best comedy series, best actor, comedy actor, actress, or you know, um, everything that it was nominated for, it won. And then Watchmen won most of the drama stuff, along with Succession. But what this indicates to me, and here's where we can start arguing, is that it seems like Hollywood is very comfortable with not pandering to conservative America. There, as we know, there aren't that many conservatives in Hollywood. You got Clint Eastwood, you got Corolla, but Corolla mostly podcasts. You've got, and he calls himself more libertarian than conservative. You've got South Park. Matt and Trey are pretty libertarian, but they take shots at everybody. I mean, if you're looking for conservatives, you mostly have to look at country music.
How do
Um,
the Emmys show that there were how was the Emmys left wing?
well, you had two separate award winners wearing, it was people were in a mix of formal and very informal wear because they went live to they had they were able to go to 500 different people via webcams or some remote. People were at home, so you saw the nominees at home. Um, and like two award winners had Breonna Taylor's name on their, or one had her name on her shirt, and another had say her name with her picture on their shirt. Um, Anthony Anderson gave a pretty long speech about how these were the blackest Emmys ever, and comedically forced Jimmy, the host, to chant Black Lives Matter. Um, uh, the winner of the best drama, Succession, had won previously for in some other category. So instead of listing a bunch of thank yous, he did a bunch of unthank yous, and he said unthank you to COVID for creating this mess, unthank you to Donald Trump for botching the response to COVID. Um, so it was very without. I didn't feel oppressed like when what's his name. Um, River Phoenix's brother,
Oh
Joaquin Phoenix.
yeah, oh yeah.
He gave an Oscar speech that was like meandering and was tried to hit all the liberal causes, and it got kind of cringy for me. But I thought that just about everything on this show um, was entertaining. But it hit all the it did not shy away from talking about all the issues. Um,
Well, okay. I don't have much to say about Hollywood being leftist. I think there will be a price to pay for that. Um, but I mean, one price being that men like me don't go to very many movies anymore.
you know who doesn't go
Uh,
to very many movies anymore? Everybody.
Anybody because of a yeah, but no, there are theaters open in Orange County and which is near here, and I was wondering if there was any film I could see that wouldn't be nauseatingly politically correct, preachy, and insulting to conservatives, and I thought, probably not. Uh, so I'm not too excited about the films.
What
Um,
about Tenet? Tenet seems to be a straight up thriller that is like so like I think it's by the guy who did the Dream movie. Um, the Dream
what
with it,
I didn't hear the beginning of what you said.
Tenet
You said I
by
the
Jonathan
tenant.
Nolan is a straight up thriller that's supposed to be really twisty and hard to figure out that probably doesn't have that much preachy politics in it.
Well, it's amazing how they do slip it in.
Yeah, but
Uh,
can't you ignore a little bit of it? Like
I
if they
mean,
make the bad guys white instead of Arab, will that make you hate the movie?
well, I mean the classic example of political correctness destroying something is Star Wars. Um, people, Star Wars has was pretty much destroyed by one director who and the producer who decided that they were going to use Star Wars as a soapbox for left-wing causes and for identity politics. That is, trying to support minorities and women
Yeah.
and whatever else they think. And so it became so overbearing that it was hard to pay attention to the movie for most people.
Well,
Um,
can
and
I
I ended up,
can I just say
well,
that
just let
I've
me,
only enjoyed a few of the Star Wars movies, and
uh,
my take on Star Wars, I understand, like, I've kind of thought that there are lots of reasons that it's not that good. Go
well, I
ahead.
mean, it went from not that good to not that good and nauseatingly preachy about left-wing causes. And I remember seeing another film by the same director that ruined Star Wars, and he did a film called Knives Out, which was just a mystery movie. But in that mystery movie, he managed to turn it into a political movie. He managed to get in long speeches about his support for illegal aliens.
Yeah, but wait, wait,
And
wait. One thing is the
yeah,
illegal alien in that fucking movie, the undocumented immigrant, is I think Anna Arenas or De Arenas, right? Plays the maid.
somebody like that. Yeah.
She is the she's I really like her a lot. She
Wow.
is she's fucking adorable. And it turns out she's been working for a long time and like anyway, people should seek her out. Um she's been Ben Affleck's girlfriend and people make fun of her on social media because there are all these pictures of her with Ben Affleck and she's always laughing with him, not at him. And people are like, what the fuck is wrong with this girl? Just Ben Affleck um, can't possibly be this funny. And I kind of really like her because she just seems delightful. But if she's always going to be like gleeful around you, I mean, that's the kind of, I mean, and she's like beautiful and perky and just, I don't know, just anyway, she
She,
seems lovely.
the director of the film is Ryan Johnson, and
Okay.
the actress was playing a nurse, like a nurse therapist or something. And I think her mother was the problem, was the illegal alien in the film.
Okay.
But my argument
Yeah, you're right,
about
nurse. I'm sorry, I
women,
confused nurse and maid, which seems that's really racist. So anyway, sorry.
well,
Sorry.
anyway, the the uh, the thing about women that laugh at your jokes is you have to love them. It's absolutely true. But the problem is then you don't know whether your jokes are really funny. So it can create a monster. I mean, you don't want to
Well,
go
yeah,
from a
but you know,
woman. You don't want to
Carol.
go. You don't want to go from a woman that laughs at all your jokes out into the real world and find out that you're really boring and stupid. You know what I mean? So it's a double-edged sword. But go ahead.
We've talked about this, and like Carol is a tough laugh, tough but fair, and we've been in couples counseling for I don't know 30 years now, once a month because we don't have our issues are not like devastating. It's mostly with just a check-in. But like one of the things that's come up during our entire history is um, I want her to be to not be so critical, to treat me like I'm a tender flower, and like my shit more. And we've talked about this, but that when you go out in LA, you will sometimes see a mutually deluded, young, very attractive couple, two people who've come out from the Midwest or some other fucking part of America's hinterlands to make it in LA, and they found each other, and they treat each other like the other person is fantastically gifted, and they work each other up with excitement for their promise and how well they're going to do in Hollywood. And they probably mostly don't. They probably end up going home, after, a few years of struggling, the way most people do. Um, but in the meantime, they've got somebody to act as a cheerleader for them, and they get to have a lot of attractive person sex, right? So I want some of that. I want Carol to be like if I ever get interviewed, um, she's like, don't say anything fucking stupid. Without the fucking, but like she worries that I'm going to say something stupid, and I'm like, don't say that. Build me up. Say you're going to do great, and I never get you're going to do great. It's always she's always worried about the chance that I'm going to say something dumb.
You know, I've never had a relationship where the person thought I was all that great and told me that all the time. I mean, and if they did, the minute they were disillusioned, they were gone.
Yeah, but you've seen
So,
those couples, right? Where they're obviously
yeah,
two good-looking lunkheads, and
yeah, yeah, and they sometimes they're musicians or singers or one's a model and one's a photographer, they these artistic types getting together and oh, I don't know. It's definitely the Boulevard of Broken Dreams.
yeah,
That's what that phrase comes from because half of LA comes here and then goes home. Then people do. They go home. They leave LA, go
yeah.
back to Ohio or Sweden or wherever.
Or else, or
So
else they become Angelinos. They 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 get work because either they're hardworking or they're competent or they're lucky, and they find a job that will pay them enough to stay here. And rent is fucking brutal here. Um, and then maybe through persistence or talent or whatever, some of them, or keeping their hair. The great watershed for male actors is if you keep your hair into your 40s, or at least you bald in an interesting way. Um,
yeah,
and so some people make it. Um,
yeah.
but anyway, this we can segue uh, into the Supreme Court.
Hey, hang
When
on for one thing. I just have to get a glass of water. Hang on.
Okay, hold on, Jade, our director. Uh-huh.
Realism. You get to
It's like
really
you're in
feel.
our houses with us.
Yeah, yeah. It's you. There's nothing. We're holding nothing back. You're seeing the inside. All right. So go ahead. What
All right.
about the
So
Supreme Court?
today's Sunday. 2 days ago, um, Ruth Bader Ginsburg tragically passed away, with 46 days to go until the election. Um, and this caused more misery among my people on Twitter than any event yet, because her death has triggered what will be um, a struggle between the Democrats trying to stop the Republicans from giving Trump his third nominee to the Supreme Court and making the court overwhelmingly conservative, or stopping him and giving the nominee to who will probably Biden, because Trump doesn't look, right now it looks like Trump has maybe a 20% chance of getting reelected. Um, and in addition to this struggle and the various tactics that are going to get rolled out over the next 6 weeks, and then again over the next 10 weeks, because 11 weeks, because there are 11 weeks between election day and when the new president takes office, or the old president for a second term. Um, so, and so that not only will there be a huge political struggle, but there's also the struggle to define what gets done as legitimate or illegitimate. Because the issue is, I mean, you know all this. This is just for the listeners who probably know it too. But in 2016, Scalia died, opening up a spot for Obama to fill. And for 11 months, Mitch McConnell stonewalled Obama and didn't allow Obama's nominee to have hearings, saying that it was an election year and you don't get a nominee during an election year. But now it's a month and a half until the election, and McConnell is going to try to push through Trump's nominee. And of course, all the Democrats are saying, well, that's completely hypocritical and illegitimate. And people are scrambling to justify their positions on both sides. So I've got a point, but before I do that, you can talk about it.
Well, the situation is different because if you have this, if the Republicans held the Senate and Obama had just taken office, and suddenly a jurist dies, and you only have 8, or you only have 7 because 2 die. Well, then, as the Republican Senate, you can't run the country without Supreme Court justices. So, not for the 4 years of the Democrat presidency. So you pretty much have to put someone up, and you have to approve them. What McConnell did was he said, look, if I can stonewall long enough, I can get our guys in, obviously. And I think this last year we can do without putting a Democrat on the Supreme Court, which is he had the legal ability to do. But
he had the power to do it. He had the power.
Yeah, well, the power because it was legal. But the situation now is you have a Republican Senate and you have a Republican president. And so that's the mandate. I mean, you don't say, if people didn't want conservative justices, they wouldn't have elected a significant majority Republican in the Senate and a Republican president. There were ample opportunities in 16 and 18 for the American people to change their mind, but what has happened is it's the prerogative of every Republican president and Senate, when they have both of those branches, to simply put up whoever they want.
All right, so I think you'll agree with me.
I don't see anything unfair or unreasonable about that.
I think I mean, you can frame it as, you can attempt to make it sound reasonable, but wouldn't you agree that it's really about who has the power to do what?
Well, it's the power that the Constitution gave them. Well, I mean, if you want to make it sound like, if you want to reframe it so it sounds like Adolf Hitler is putting a gun to people's heads and they're being strangled by Spanish garroting methods if they don't, I mean, you can frame it any way you want, but it was written in the American Constitution that the president has the power to appoint justices that are approved of by the Senate, and now there is no problem. They're doing exactly what our founders thought they should do.
But in 2016, fucking McConnell stonewalled, and that's not in the Constitution. Now, he got away with it, saying that, it's too close to an election. and we should see who the next president is. But there's nothing in the Constitution about that, and the precedents are somewhat weak in that you just don't get people nominated every year for there've only been, Ruth RBG was only the 107th Supreme Court justice in the history of the nation. So it doesn't happen that often. So somebody can argue, well, there's never been a Supreme Court justice nominated in an election year, but that's just, a lot of it is just a matter of probability.
Well, what I heard Mitch McConnell actually say that uh, that it hadn't been, it was the last time an opposing Senate agreed to a president's choice during an election year was in 1840.
Okay.
So it's a fairly established thing that if you run the Senate, you can try to thwart the president's choices. And if you have the presidency and the Senate, you get to have who you want on the Supreme Court. I don't know, just whining about it is not a legal argument, Rick.
Well, at this
Or a
point,
moral one.
I'm not whining about it, for at least for the sake of this discussion. I may whine about it on Twitter, but right now I'm just saying that it makes a whole lot more sense. I mean, what we're talking about is having the power to do it. McConnell had, whatever his power was rooted in, like I think in 2016, part of McConnell's power was that Obama wasn't willing to pull out all the stops and try some shit himself to get Merrick Garland nominated. Like, there were various tactics he could have tried.
Like what?
Like, now we can debate whether it would have worked or not, but he could have tried for a vacation appointment where Obama waits until the Senate has adjourned and he just appoints him during a hiatus of the Senate. I mean, and maybe it would have worked, maybe it wouldn't. But people talked about, well, that if there was a risk of that happening, then that McConnell just wouldn't adjourn the Senate. He'd just keep people there over Christmas or fucking whatever, so that there'd always be somebody in place to stop the emergency appointment. But Obama didn't try any of that, largely because Obama had this kind of chill kind of political demeanor, and because everybody thought that Hillary Clinton would get elected and would just push the nominee or another non-conservative nominee through. It didn't seem dire. But anyway, the whole situation, both in 2016 and now, makes sense. I mean, you can't ignore political power in what goes on. And I don't really want to argue about what's justified and what isn't. If you want, we can have an argument about what's hypocritical and what isn't, but really I don't want to have that argument either, because if you want that fucking argument, you can just look at social media and a gazillion people are trotting out the arguments for and against, in terms of all that shit. That Ted Cruz is saying we need 9 justices in case the election ends up being tricky. And I mean, all the arguments are there, and that's not an argument I want to have, unless you do.
Well, I mean, we need 9 justices because I believe the Democrats are planning on cheating. They are, so. But which argument do you want to have?
I want to argue about a point that nobody else has. And basically, okay, you're going to hate it, but it's the robot girlfriend argument. And also the counter to that argument that we need 9 justices is the last time we had an electoral crisis in the year 2000, we only had 8 justices. But anyway, my argument is there's been a trend since the 80s. The Republicans have pushed for smaller government, successfully pushed for smaller government since Ronald Reagan, who became president in 1981, right? He was the
Uh, I don't think government's gotten smaller.
no, but the
Not
push was to, but real that was one of his things was for more limited government, right? The
okay,
Republicans have been fighting big government for from the top down for 40 years, and probably
theoretically.
and for 10 years before that when they started developing the idea in conservative think tanks. And government may not have gotten smaller, but it's certainly gotten more polarized and you could argue more dysfunctional. All right, so while we were breaking, our director brought up a point that Nancy Pelosi, according to our director, baldly exercised power because the Democrats control the House, where she's the leader, to impeach Trump. And if he says, I'm sorry, he or she says, if Pelosi has the power to do that, then why can't McConnell have the power to fucking, push through a nomination? And I'm like, I'm not arguing against power. I'm saying the power exists. But that does bring up another point, which is they're talking about Pelosi and others. I don't know if she brought it up, but anyway, people are talking about impeaching Trump again because I think there are only 13 working days for the Senate between now and the election. And it's not clear which takes precedence in the case of an impeachment. So if the House impeaches Trump again, the Senate is obligated to hold a trial of Trump again. And it's not clear that Supreme Court hearings would take precedence over an impeachment trial. So,
Actually,
I mean,
Rick,
there's a lot of
that's
shit.
not. I mean, just to cut you off right there, that's not true. The Senate, McConnell didn't have to hold a trial for the last one. He
Okay.
didn't have to. The Senate, legally, McConnell can refuse to table the House's motion for impeachment. He can just say, sorry, this isn't interesting enough, or it doesn't have enough merit, or he can put it to the House immediately, and people would have to vote within an hour of getting it.
Okay.
So that's not going to work. Anyway, go on with you. You said you had a really long point.
All right. One more thing. One more short point is there are lots of Twitter is full of things the Democrats might try to derail this nomination because Trump will probably nominate Amy Coney Barrett sometime this week, and people are full of advice, and the Democrats themselves are saying nothing is off the table, but people who are cynical about the Democrats, including myself, all kind of say, yeah, you can talk about it. You're not going to fucking do anything because the Democrats have historically been pussies. So anyway, my long point, and I'll see if I can shorten it up, is that as government has gotten more dysfunctional and polarized, somebody points out that 5 of the 6 justices appointed by conservative presidents were appointed by presidents who didn't win the popular vote, at least the first time they were elected. So 5 of the justices are minority justices, and the Senate is majority Republican, even though the states represented by the Republicans in the Senate represent a minority of the population. So what we've got is government by a minority. And let's say you guys get another justice through, and we've got an overwhelmingly conservative um, Supreme Court that gets rid of Roe versus Wade, which leaves it up to the states to provide abortion or not. And maybe they get rid of all of Obamacare. Maybe they, you know, do a bunch of fucking things that make it tougher to vote in liberal states. Maybe that, you know, this that maybe government um, continues to kind of act against majority sentiments. For instance, there are a lot of aspects of gun control that are supported by a large majority. Something like 90% of Americans want increased background checks before you buy a gun. Nothing like that has passed in years. Um, so anyway, my general argument is that if government continues to be kind of broken and unrepresentative of what Americans want, Americans will have to figure out alternate means to get what they want, which, at least according to some smart people, means forming extra governmental coalitions using varying degrees of tech, of like social networking coalitions to provide the things that government, you know, that you might like government to provide, but it's too broken to provide. And for people who like to read shit, the author of a bunch of science fiction novels who's best at describing this kind of broken nation where people band together to take care of shit themselves is Cory Doctorow. And the best book that describes this broken nation is called The Rapture of the Nerds, co-authored by a guy named Charles Stross. And these two authors, plus another author, Neal Stephenson, all present a near future in which the America has kind of fractured into, you know, liberal parts and then Bible land. And so I don't keep talking a bunch. That's where I'll stop my argument.